What do we got here? What's going on? I mean, it's 6:10 a.m. on the East Coast of the good old USA. Now, I always try when I figure out time zones for Australia, but each one of you are different.
Could you try
Oh,
again?
shut up, Siri. Siri thought I was talking to her.
She's so needy.
She is. What the heck? How do I turn that off? I don't even know. I gotta do my phone. But Lee, what time is it there at your place? The airport?
So Chris and I are actually in the same city. So Chris and I are good.
Okay.
It is 10 past 10 p.m. on Thursday, the 26th of January.
Okay. And what about you, Ian?
It's only 10 past 9 for me because I'm living in the past, though not as far in the past as you.
But don't you guys have a time zone that's like a half hour off, not a full hour?
Yes, that's
That's South Australia.
Why? Why half hour? Why not go one way or the other? I don't know. That's really difficult, the half hour one.
If you'd ever been to South Australia, you'd understand.
Okay. That's what I was wondering. That's what I was wondering. So, I've often thought about when you guys are in Australia at Christmas time, what it's like to have Christmas in the middle of summer, right?
Well, first of all, Santa comes on a surfboard.
Oh, okay. Well, that's perfect. That's perfect. But here's what happened to me. I often say, well, how does that work exactly? And then I was down in Florida for December this year for a wedding, family wedding. And I said, this is how they do it. There's Christmas trees everywhere. There's decoration. It's just warm. That's all. There's just no snow. So I said, this is how it happens in Australia. Perfect. I'm so used to, I'm on the East Coast I'm right on the border between North and South, the Mason-Dixon line. My state borders that line. So we're right in the middle there. So usually it's pretty cold here. New York, I'm up on, New York, some of the northern states. And it's always cold. But I was down in Florida. I said, this is how they do it. There's beautiful Christmas decorations everywhere. Everything's decorated. Did I see? I don't know if I saw any Santa Clauses, but I saw plenty of other Christmas things. So now I know. Now I know exactly what's going on there. So we have a lot to talk about today.
It can be very hot here.
But what do you guys?
Please.
You don't do, like for Christmas, you don't do like Frosty the Snowman, right?
No. Does your Santa have sleeves?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because our Santa's just like in a singlet.
Okay.
And shorts.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's exactly that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Jewish guy.
Well, here's the thing. I had Mike Yanovich on the other day, and he said, well, when in the Middle East, where the birth of, Christ was celebrated, there wasn't any snow, right?
And it's not celebrated as much anymore.
Well, I mean, the celebration is from the Middle East. I mean, that's where the epicenter was, and there was no snow, even though they depict it that way.
Well. Actually, funnily enough, these days, every winter, Jerusalem will get a smattering of snow. They might get like 1 day or 2 days during the winter, but it can actually snow in Jerusalem.
Well, I didn't know. Well, you're right. I saw that this year, as a matter of fact. I saw that this year.
But it probably wasn't snowing 2,000 years ago, so yeah.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not for sure. So we got all kinds of things to catch up on. Did you guys catch yourselves in the Final Cut Pro Summit documentary? Lee and Ian? And Chris, you were actually on there too because you were on the thing last year. So I'm hoping I don't have to do version 2 of that this fall. I'm hoping that version 1 is going to take care of business. So they had the Final Cut Pro global tour, but they've at least delayed going to overseas. It's not going to be Q1, and it's also not going to be in April because FMC is very involved with NAB. So it's not going to be through April. And they have the editors retreat in June, right? So they're not going to do it in June. I don't think they're going to do it in May. I'm just thinking maybe that's going to be delayed. Maybe that's not going to happen. So that's just, nobody told me that.
Well, I don't know. Look, I don't have any special information about when it's going to happen, but there's a good month there between April and June, and I imagine they probably won't need too many people. These aren't really staff heavy events, so I think they could maybe spare a couple of people to head to London and help set up an event there. I am hopeful, fingers crossed, that they do want to host a session in London, because I'd love to go there. That'd be fun.
No, I understand. It's just people were saying, well, this, the summit. It's not the same as the Creative Summit. There's no comparison between the two. They took the Creative Summit, which everybody was coming together from around the world, and they divided it up into 10. And instead, there's 10 separate little things. Not that it's nothing wrong with that. I'd like to see them do both of those things. Start with the Creative Summit in Cupertino, the big event, and if they want to do worldwide events, go from there, right? And also virtual.
I think that would work really well. I think it's particularly a shame that they've delayed the European and the Tokyo events, because the US, even though they split it up into different cities in the US, the summit has always been in the US. So whilst for people in the US, they may still have to travel to different states, it's still within the same country. Whereas people outside of the US, we've always had to travel overseas to go to the summit. So I was really keen to see what the response was going to be like out for events outside of the US. So I really hope that still goes ahead, because I think there would definitely be a lot of people who would be keen to go to something like that in the cities where they were
Absolutely.
planning to run those.
I absolutely agree. It seems like they had, I'm just going to guesstimate, they had a couple dozen people each one of the U.S. events. I think the L.A. event was probably the most popular one, but I think it had a couple dozen participants. I'm not sure if that's the kind of numbers they were expecting. I think that may have an influence on the European side, but in any event, something's going to happen each year. So,
I think it's an interesting thing, because I was a little bit confused about who the target market was for these events. Because in terms of who Final Cut is marketed to these days, is it being marketed to sort of the middle to high range editors? Is it being marketed to YouTube social media influencers? Is it being marketed to all of them? Would the people who are on YouTube already, are they going to be interested in going to an event like this, or would they be, we'll just learn everything on YouTube because that's the sort of the world that they live in? So I'd love to sit down with some folks and sort of talk about who are these events marketed? Like, who do you want to turn up to these things, and then how are we going to communicate with people to encourage them to turn up? From my perspective, at least, I think the real value that I get out of the summit, the educational side of it, is great, but you can get that online. For me, the real benefit is the networking, whether it's virtual, and virtual is not the same as in person. If we can't do in person, virtual is great, but in person is ideal. And the networking, the meeting people like yourselves. And I mean, I can point to 2 or 3 jobs that came out of people that I'd met at the summit. So like I look at going to the summit, like I justify going to the summit as a business expense.
Sure.
And so for me, it's the networking, and that leads to work. So at least I think for folks like us, again, I'm not a marketer, so take my advice with where that comes from. I would be interested to see if they marketed it to folks like us as, hey, come along to the summit, you'll learn some great stuff, but it's really the people that you meet and the networking that you're going to do and the contacts that you're going to make, which is the real benefit that you're going to get from an event like this.
Absolutely. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, and you're never going to have the same experience virtually because you don't really meet the people. If you're sharing a drink with someone, if you're actually playing a trivia game in a bar with people you've met on YouTube, or you're seeing Mike Yanovich performing magic tricks in front of you. That's significantly more fun than being on a video chat. Now, being on a video chat is a heap of fun, and I talked for hours and hours after the summit. The meet and greet thing afterwards went significantly longer than the conference.
Right.
And look, that was a heap of fun, but it is a different thing. And yeah, look, the more people you can get in one place, the better. I do think that the learning content at the summits and at the virtual day is a bit different to what you see online. It's significantly longer. It's a lot more in depth. Certainly the stuff that I talk about at the summit isn't stuff that I've seen on YouTube or that I put on YouTube.
Right.
Or that I've really seen anyone else talking about on YouTube. It is a bit different. And, that side of things is good, but it's difficult. When you split up an event that is kind of a big event that's a few days and you put it into little boxes, you aren't going to meet as many people because they're smaller events. You aren't going to get so many people there, doing the networking thing because it's a one-day thing. And if people have things to go to in the evening, they're just going to leave at the end of the day and go home rather than hang out at the hotel bar. And, it is a different thing by its very nature. And look, if I do end up going to the Tokyo and or London events, I won't be there for just one day. I will be very much hanging out in the evenings afterwards because that's where the fun happens.
Sure, of course. So how did I miss, I've heard that you're the second or third people that have told me about Yanovich and his magic tricks. How did I miss that? Mm-hmm. Where was he doing magic tricks? In his hotel room, in his underwear? I don't even know.
It was in the bar.
In the bar
you just got to stay up later.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean at where we had the social mixer thing? And I left early.
Yeah.
I'm an early riser.
Well, Richard, what are you doing?
No, I know.
No, you don't leave early.
You
don't get up early.
I won't next time.
People staying up late. You're gonna. Sorry.
I won't next time.
Yeah.
You can sleep on the plane home.
No, I don't leave. If that's a Saturday, sometimes it's different nights. They switch it around. Was it Saturday? But I don't leave till Sunday anyways. That's not a problem. But no, you're right. You're right. But like this morning, I'm up at 2:30 in the morning, Eastern, my time. That's my 2:30, 3 o'clock is my normal time to get up. So my sleep time is like 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night.
Well, then, in that case, you need to convince them to have the summit in Australia, and then your sleep patterns will be perfect for staying up late. Problem solved.
Yeah. I've had a very bizarre week for sleep patterns myself because last weekend, about 5 nights ago, I was teaching one of the Apple certified courses on Final Cut Pro on US time. So I had to get up and start teaching at 1 a.m. and I got to finish teaching at 8 a.m. And I figured out how to do it. Don't try to stay up late. You will fall asleep around 6 or 6:30 or feel like you're going to fall asleep, and it's a disaster. The secret is you get up an hour earlier every morning, and you have to go to bed progressively earlier to compensate for that.
Right.
So by the end of the week, I was going to bed at 6:30 in the evening and, getting up at 12:30, 6 hours later. But it did work. I was pretty good. And then the next day, you can collapse in a heap and get back on time. It only takes about a day.
Absolutely.
So that's the tip. But yeah, I think if you're normally getting up at 2:30, I'd have to ask what's wrong. Is it something in your diet?
No.
Is it personal choice?
No.
Is it pets?
I've worked in D.C. for over 20-some years. So all through the 90s, I worked in Washington, all through the 2000s till I quit the National Archives 3 or 4 years ago. I get to D.C. at 6 o'clock in the morning to avoid traffic. And I leave in the afternoon at 2:30 in the afternoon to avoid traffic. So in order to get there at 6 o'clock, I have to leave at 4:45, which means I have to get up 3:30-ish, 3 o'clock. I don't like rushing in the morning. I do not like rushing in the morning. So let me show you. Where is that graphics? Let me see if this is the right one. Here we go. So here is my philosophy. Right there. When I get up in the morning, I only have time for coffee and cats. and relax. I don't want to be rushing around. Oh, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. That's my philosophy right there. Now, if you know who that is, that's Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks. That's
You will do just fine in Melbourne.
I'm sure I will. So, Chris Hawking, you haven't been doing anything, have you? You've been just slacking off for the last couple of months, right?
Yeah, I've been, well, I haven't been doing that much actual work. I've been doing my crazy side projects. So yeah, I've been doing some coding stuff in between the chaos of running a production company and wrangling 2 young children. So yeah, the last little while well, as of today, I release on the App Store 2 products, BRAW Toolbox, which allows you to bring BRAW files directly into Final Cut, and GyroFlow Toolbox, which allows you to import GyroFlow files into Final Cut.
Yay.
So we are going to talk about that very specifically in a few minutes. But first off, complete congratulations to you, Chris.
Thank you.
Absolutely astounding what you've done. And the reason is, let me get back to Cooper here a second. The reason is this. I love this comment that you put up. Exciting times, lots of very smart developers told me it would be impossible to add BRAW support to Final Cut Pro. Lots told me it would be impossible to do it on the App Store. But you did it. You did both of those things.
I'm a stubborn man.
But so I guess the question I have is, why haven't either Blackmagic, who have lots of resources, and or Apple? You did it as a 1 or 2 man crew or woman crew, whatever you have working on, unless you worked on it by yourself. Why haven't they? Do you think it's political between the 2 companies,
Yeah,
or?
Well, it's political or technical. Blackmagic said multiple times that they'd love to add BRAW support to Final Cut, but there's no open API to do that. There's no codec API to do that. So they're just waiting on Apple to give them a call. Here's the Magic API to do it. So Blackmagic can't really do anything until Apple give them their blessing. And Apple haven't done it for whatever reason. The BRAW API is completely open, so anyone can add BRAW support to anything. And as a non-programmer, just a regular guy, even I was able to, it's not rocket science. So yeah, it's definitely possible for Apple to do it. It's definitely not possible for Blackmagic to do it without Apple. So
But how did
Apple
you
does
do it?
I did.
You not only did it, you got it on the App Store, which is another level of accomplishment.
Yeah, so there's 2 things there. So to get it to work at all, I basically had to work out the limitations and come up with clever workarounds to make it all work. In a similar way that Command Post is a bunch of untraditional ideas to make stuff happen. Everyone told me that you could never add a scrolling timeline to Final Cut, and we did it. So
thank you for that.
That's all right. So, and then getting it on the App Store, that was really tricky, basically just because of all the security and sandboxing permissions that you need to do. And also, there's never been, as far as I know, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but there's never been any FX applications on the App Store. There's quite a few workflow extensions, and there's an Apple story about workflow extensions. And there's a couple of motion templates. CoreMelt has a free bunch of motion templates on the App Store, but no one's ever put an effect on there before. And probably because it's really hard to do. Not because it's just a lot of hoops to get through all the sandboxing permissions and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
So do any of you use Stream Deck? I have Stream Deck XL.
I have every button known to man, but I have none of them connected.
You know what
I
use?
do have a Stream Deck. What's this one?
Yeah,
whatever the new one is.
The new one with the dials. So I have a Stream Deck XL for Ecamm Live for switching things around. But I also use it for my dock on my Mac. I launch all my apps from it because my eyesight is I can't see my little icons at the bottom very well, but I can sure see them on the Stream Deck, and I have a couple of pages, and that's my new dock. All my apps launch launch, launch, launch. So it's pretty cool. I really liked it when I saw that was available, and I can switch back and forth between different profiles. So right now I'm on Ecamm Live, which is what I'm doing to, to switch things around live. So Ian, you have a Final Cut Pro book, right?
Yeah.
It hasn't been
I think
updated
this
to
is the moment where
10.7
I'm
yet.
supposed to hold it up.
It hasn't been
Well,
updated to
what
10.7 yet.
There is no 10.7, Richard. I think you know quite well that there is no 10.7. I'm sure we would all love a 10.7. I'm not under any NDAs. I have no knowledge of any 10.7. I'm assuming the next version might be 10.7, but I've got no idea. It's.
I guess the question is,
the book will be updated.
That's what I was going to ask you.
As soon as there's a new big version. Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask you.
The book gets updated with the major versions. Like I don't want to ask the publisher to, put out, to go through all the revision steps when it's like just 10.6 to 10.6.4. So yeah, the current version of the book has a couple of minor discrepancies because, I described the tracking interface that was added to 10.6 and it changed just a little bit since then. But that is it. No, look, at the moment, we're ready for any updates that will eventually, hopefully, come out. And the book is up to date for 10.6.4, but it won't really be released until we see a more major update. And then I'll go through and write all that as well, and it'll all be updated in the next major release. But that's fine. I mean, I think we're all hoping to see something substantial, and there's all kinds of cool things happening in the slightly wider world of video editing, many of which Apple could be introducing, besides all the very cool stuff that Chris is working on. And look, if I had a modern Blackmagic camera, I've only got really old Blackmagic cameras here, but if I had a modern Blackmagic camera, I'd be all over BRAW Toolbox. It would be a massive time saver because the BRAW codecs can save quite a lot of space, or compared to ProRes, they have some interesting advantages. I know some people like the constant quality thing, some people like there's lower data rates, and you've got both. Like it's some solid options. I'm really excited by what's happening with the AI stuff, with stuff like Whisper. So Whisper AI is blindingly fast local transcription, and there's a Mac app called Mac Whisper, which is free, and you can pay a small amount of money for a larger, more complex model. But it does an astoundingly good job and exports to SRT. And I know there's a bunch of transcription apps which have been around for a long time. So, there's Simon Says, there's SpeedScriber, there's lots and lots of them. And then there's the transcription apps like Lumberjack, which will, take your transcript and then actually give you an editing interface, so you can edit using text and then turn that into a Final Cut Pro timeline
for $15 a month. That's what they charge.
Yeah, $15
unlimited,
a month.
unlimited transcriptions.
Yeah, because they used to have to use a per minute AI transcription service, and now they can use Whisper, which is what most people seem to be moving to because it's open source, incredibly accurate, and very, very, very fast. It's blindingly fast. Felipe Baez has got a video out showing just how quick it is. I think I took a 4 or 5 minute video as a quick test, and it was done in 10 seconds. Like it's so quick. And I want to see all that stuff incorporated more thoroughly into the app. And I think there are ways to do this today. It just involves a few more hoops. So Mac Whisper to SRT, translate those somehow maybe to markers. But the problem with captions in Final Cut is they only go on a project. And I want a good way to have proper captions, exactly like we have on a timeline, really. I want them on clips as well, to make them searchable to a time, so that you could search for a phrase somebody said and instantly find it in your rushes.
Oh, that's a great idea.
What I want.
Yeah.
You could do that today, I'm sure, with Lumberjack. That would be, perfect use for that. That's what it's for. But I think there's room for Apple to add a whole lot more AI smarts, like, stuff which I've wished about on this show before. Alex Rakuglia went and implemented. So the auto tagging, Apple should do that. Apple should be able to find where there's water in a shot, where there's a cat in a shot, where the shot is mostly red. It should be able to detect all of that and just do it for you on the fly. It should be able to detect people like the really excellent effect Keeper can, to do basically instant green screens for people. And it should be able to do the object recognition stuff, which you can do in Preview and Keynote now. I'd love to see that in video as well. It obviously becomes a lot more difficult when you get, it's got to be temporally consistent from frame to frame to frame. And that's a whole extra level of difficulty.
Right.
Some of the stuff Apple have to do, which Keeper isn't perfect because it doesn't have access to it can't do temporally consistent stuff because the API is not there, apparently. I asked the dev, hey, can we smooth this out and maybe connect this? And no, apparently. And it should.
So Lee,
yeah, there's plenty of scope.
Are you familiar with the advantages of BRAW over ProRes RAW one way or the other?
Yeah.
If you're doing the RAW formats, I mean, because
yeah, I'm gonna drop $1 either way and say they're both good.
Okay.
But like with Chris's tool, which, by the way, Chris, I'm on the App Store now. I'll be sending you $63 very soon. That's it. By the way, if you're listening in the US, it's a lot cheaper in your dollar than our peso, so that don't worry, it's not that much over there, and totally worth it. I would just love to be able to work with everything. It's kumbaya. If there's a job that's been, because sometimes, particularly since COVID, I used to shoot and edit pretty much everything that I worked on, whereas obviously through COVID, there wasn't that much that I could shoot. There was only so much I could shoot in my house. So I ended up doing a lot more editing than I had, just pure editing jobs. So I get sent footage that's been shot on everything and anything. And so, yeah, no, it'd be great to just have the option to go, I don't care if this is Red RAW, I don't care if it's BRAW, I don't care if it's ProRes RAW. I need to work with it. Just let me work with it. Right.
So let me pull this up here. Here we go. Let's see what it is on the App Store. $39.99 this week for 1 week, right, Chris?
Yeah. So until, 1 week from Monday. So it's available for pre-order at the moment, and then at Monday 9 a.m. Melbourne time, I will press the Go Live button, and then then you can download from the App Store. But in the meantime, you can download the test light version, which is exactly the same as the App Store version. So you can test it out for free until Monday 9 a.m. Melbourne time.
That's fantastic. Now, so as I've talked to Ian offline about, I was on the verge of buying a Sony camera, the Sony a7 IV. I want a full frame. For my GH5, I want a full frame for low light and some other reasons. Even though I have to switch lenses, what a pain in the butt that is. But Lumix just came out, Panasonic just came out with the S5 IIX.
Get it.
That is the one I'm going to get, which is the L-mount series lenses instead of the Sony lenses. And it can do RAW over HDMI, which means it can do both ProRes RAW and BRAW into an Atomos recorder once it's enabled. Which one would I want to use? Do I want to use ProRes RAW?
Atomos will only do ProRes RAW, I'd assume. And you'd have to use the Blackmagic recorder to do BRAW.
Oh, okay. There's a clarification right there. There's a clarification.
So I would probably just I'd buy an Atomos one and shoot ProRes RAW, because that's native. There's no messing around. You don't like BRAW Toolbox. Basically, the reason I built it, it's not for people doing Hollywood feature films or indie feature films or TV or that sort of thing. It's really for editors like myself that get dumped 2 terabytes, 4 terabytes, 8 terabytes of raw files from a client to do a fast turnaround edit. And I don't want to have to waste time using something like Color Finale Transcoder or Edit Ready or Resolve to convert it to ProRes files, because I'll waste time converting it and I'll need double the hard drive space or triple the hard drive space depending on what I'm going to. So it doesn't really compete with Edit Ready and Color Finale Transcoder, because you kind of need both tools. Like there'll be times if I don't have a deadline and I've got heaps of hard drive space, I can just convert it to ProRes and edit the same way that I always would. And for me, I'm not a colorist, as you can see by my perfectly lit camera. I'm not very good at color. So I'm using the color board, essentially. I'm doing a Chris grade, which is basically contrast saturation. And if it's anything more serious than that, it goes to a Kevin grade who sits over there, and then he'll use curves and scopes and makes it look amazing, and there'll be 100 effects on it, or he'll send it to Resolve. So for me, as an editor that does a lot of fast turnaround stuff and live stuff and that sort of thing, it's really, I would be way faster using BRAW Toolbox and throwing it into Final Cut than I would be if I had to throw it into Resolve instead, because I'm so used to Final Cut. I can use Resolve, I understand Resolve, but I'm not going to have as much fun doing it. So yeah, for me, having the ability just to be able to throw in some BRAW stuff is just, will be a game changer for those few clients a year that dump us a bunch of BRAW files because someone forgot to change a setting in the camera, or there was no discussion in pre-production of what format to shoot.
Right.
Because we've got Blackmagic cameras. I'm currently using one of the original 4K weird old original Blackmagic cameras, whatever they were. Blackmagic Cinema Camera 4K. But we've always shot ProRes. Like this is literally the first week or last couple of weeks is the first time we've ever shot BRAW just to test out the software and make sure it all works well and that sort of thing. We just always shot ProRes. So yeah.
So it sounds like I'm going to be shooting ProRes RAW. Because I'm not going to buy two recorders.
Recommend it. Yeah, well, it really depends. Like I said, if you're editing Final Cut, delivering Final Cut,
yes,
so the hardware is optimized for ProRes RAW. It's got hardware encoding and that sort of thing.
I can go for it, Lee.
Okay, sorry. So just because, Richard, something else I would recommend is if you can wait a little while, maybe look at the S52X. Because that will do internal ProRes. Now, not internal ProRes RAW. You still have to go out to get the ProRes RAW, but just internal ProRes on a camera.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Like,
the X's.
In 90%, and in 90% of situations, you don't need RAW. You know, like if you're going to the Galapagos Islands, you're never going to be there again. Shoot, and you've got enough hard drive space. Shoot everything in RAW. But if you're just shooting. But if you're just shooting interviews and stuff, like I've got terabytes of ProRes RAW from the Galapagos Islands that I haven't edited yet. But if you're just shooting, corporate interviews, shoot ProRes. Hell, shoot ProRes LT. It'll still look fantastic.
Right.
No. Have some standards, Lee. Now, I can give data rates here. I'm looking at some BRAW. Now, this is 6K. Look, so if you're shooting on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, there's constant bitrate or constant quality. Constant quality means variable bitrate. But if you look at the constant bitrate options, they vary. There's 3:1, 5:1, 8:1, and 12:1, which range from 20 gigabytes a minute, 12 gigabytes a minute, 7, and 4. Now, ProRes RAW is variable. And the Apple stats say it's between ProRes 422 and ProRes HQ. So looking at the white paper for 6K, their data sits at, for 24p, between 509 gigabytes an hour and 764 gigabytes an hour. So if we split the difference and say 650 gigabytes an hour, that's about 10 or 11 gigabytes an hour. So that puts ProRes RAW squarely in the middle of the constant bitrate BRAW options. And
But
the constant quality options are a lot more variable and weird. And that's all 6K, of course.
But keep in mind also that with the variable bitrate of the Blackmagic Pocket. In fact, I'm talking to you on a Blackmagic Pocket 6K right here. I just use it as my webcam because why not? And with that variable, you pick your variable, but then it stays within that variable, I think, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with ProRes RAW variable, ProRes RAW will vary as you're shooting depending on what's happening in your scene. So if it was just someone sitting quite quietly like this speaking, your bitrate's going to be quite low. If it's me speaking and I'm hands all over the place and there's a bar fight going on behind me, suddenly your bitrate goes up while you're recording. So ProRes is doing that cleverly as you're recording, whereas with BRAW, you pick one and it sticks with that one for that, for that shot.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah, okay. I think maybe the constant quality option in BRAW is going to vary like that because it's got ranges. So 14 to 30 gigabytes a minute, 9 to 23, 6 to 17, and 4 to 10. So, and that's Q0, Q1, Q3, Q5. So I think BRAW lets it go both ways, whereas the ProRes RAW is more like the constant quality option with variable bitrate. Anyway, I mean, if you're only doing interviews and you don't need RAW at all, have you considered, Richard, perhaps a GH6 is in your future?
May
Because
I
this
say
can
it
do
shouldn't
6K.
be?
Well, just let me go.
Go ahead.
So, number one, you can do ProRes internally or now, so long as you use the CF Express, not the SD. That will do ProRes. But you can plug in, like the S5 2X, you can plug in an SSD if you want to and do direct to SSD recording. It'll do 6K. It'll do Open Gate. And if you've never seen Open Gate, this is something I was talking about. It means that it's a 4:3 image. It'll record the whole thing, not just widescreen. So fantastic for doing portrait and landscape deliveries from the one thing you've shot. And it'll do that at 200 megabit in HEVC, 6K across, or 5.8K across,
Right.
and in a 4:3 aspect ratio. If you do ProRes, you won't get the 4:3, and instead of being 200 megabit, it's 1.1 gigabit. So you multiply your data rate by 5 times and enter Lee territory for storage requirements.
Right.
But now let me ask you something, Richard. Do you want your shots in focus?
Well,
Because if you do, maybe don't go with the GH6. So I was just in New Zealand twice in the last 2 months, once for a job, once on vacation. And for the vacation, a very nice friend of mine who's a Lumix ambassador loaned me 2 GH6s because I've started a new YouTube channel and I was going to shoot some content while I was in New Zealand. And so I was using the first of all, Ian is absolutely right in the sense the footage you get out of the Lumix, the GH6 it's beautiful footage. It's internal ProRes, which is lovely. Those cards will melt your hands when they come out of the camera. They're a little warm.
that's funny.
But that's to be understood. But the autofocus, because I was shooting myself and I didn't have a crew or anything with me, the autofocus struggles, and I'm being kind.
Yes. No, I understand.
Oh yeah. No, you do not use the autofocus as a one-person crew. Like that was your mistake, trusting the autofocus, because it's not great.
I normally shoot Sony, so I'm used to trusting the autofocus.
Or the Lumix
I know.
S5 2X has
So
Yes,
the
and
autofocus on this
autofocus.
new one should be fantastic.
I would 100% there will be a G6 Mark II which will have the face detect autofocus eventually.
Right.
Look, for me, I'm not shooting myself alone. None of this has ever bothered me. I am very much a manual focus on request kind of guy. It's been working fine. And in fact, tomorrow I'm going to be probably picking up a secondhand lens, which I'm definitely going to be doing that with, which has been a really popular lens for GH5 and GH6 shooters for about nearly a decade now, which is the Sigma 18 to 35, because it's 1.8. And if you use it with a speed booster, that's about an f1.2, which is an absurdly fast lens. It makes it look like full frame if you want all that
That's what I'm shooting
bokeh
on right now,
and-
Ian. That's what I have right now on my GH4.
There you go.
That Limix. But I'm
Lovely.
getting
Lee's got a full frame smirk to share, I'm sure. Please,
No.
please, Lee,
No,
tell
no,
me,
no, no,
tell
no,
me
no.
how much
I was going to say
blurriness I should experience.
at that aperture, you know, the nose hair on your nose will be in focus and your cheek will be out of focus. It's great. I love it. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Look,
can I
Clyde's still
tell you
like
just a
that
little bit of
kind
a
of thing. It's good.
Oh no. Hey, look, I love me some shallow depth of field. I'm all for you. It's look, I'm yanking your chain a little bit. Any you can't buy a bad camera these days. It's just I was a little annoyed because there was one particular shot I was shooting all this stuff. So for those who don't know, my new YouTube channel, it was supposed to be a bit of fun, but it's turned into a bit of a thing. It's called Not a Car Guy, and it's about electric cars. So I was shooting some content in a car, and I had it rigged. I had the camera rigged up in the car shooting me, and we were stationary, and I was explaining stuff. But what I didn't realize is that at the holiday home that we rented, there was like an outdoor shower. So this shower is about 10 feet sort of behind me, and my wife had put my son's little baseball cap just on the wall of the shower just to dry out because we'd been at the beach. And the time that I sort of leaned forwards and the cap came into view because my head was normally blocking it, but when I would lean forward, the cap would be in view. The camera would focus 15 feet behind me on the cap.
Yeah.
And because I was shooting myself, I didn't notice this.
Yeah, there's a feature, Lee, which on the GH6 specifically designed to address this shortcoming, which lets you set a focus
I had that
limit
turned on.
so that it doesn't go that far behind you. But so I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there.
User error. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, I think it's a classic pedcac situation here, but that's you know problem exists between it's it's fine.
So Chris, how exactly does BRAW? See, I call it BRAW. When my girlfriend saw that on the screen, she goes, "What's BRAW? What's BRAW?" So Toolbox. I said, "No, it's actually BRAW, right? Blackmagic RAW." So how exactly does that work with?
Do you want me
Final
to
Cut?
show you?
Let me pull up, see if I can get your other screen on, and let me just do one thing here. See if I can do that. I'm going to pull up, take this off, and pull up another camera. Hold on one second, please. And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to choose. I'm doing this behind the scenes. What did I assign your camera? Assign to guest 4. Let me pull up guest 4. Guest 4. There we go. And enlarge that. You guys aren't seeing this. I'm doing this on the preview monitor. Then I'll publish it, which I'm going to do right now. There we go.
Hey. All right. So basically, when you download it from the App Store, actually, I don't even have it. Basically, just a very simple application. You can see here, you basically click a button to install motion templates, metadata view, and LUTs. And then you can go and launch Final Cut. What it adds is a workflow extension. So if we click the little workflow extension button, we can see here, we've got BRAW Toolbox. So all I need to do is click that, brings up our fancy workflow extension. And you can just drag and drop BRAW files from Finder, or I can click this import files button, do that. I've got a bunch of stuff here, so I'll just select a bunch of footage. And you can see here, we have the BRAW footage. I can scrub through. It's really good performance. We're using the Blackmagic RAW SDK, so it's using the same code as Resolve and Edit Ready and Color Finale Transcoder. So it's really zippy. I can play and I can see all the metadata. So let's have a look at this surfing footage. I can just adjust the exposure. You can see it's updating here. I might change the gamma. Let's change it to custom. And then once I change it to custom, I get all the custom gamma control. So we'll just make it a bit more saturated. And you basically use this area to do all your sort of setup. You can see lots of metadata here, and you can change the columns. So for example, I can scroll across and see the lens type and the crop size. And if you use the metadata within the Blackmagic cameras, you can see the good takes and the scenes and that sort of thing. And then basically the way BRAW Toolbox works is to keep things simple and performant. We just rip out the audio as WAV files and send that to Final Cut as WAV files. It just simplifies things.
Okay.
So we'll choose an audio folder and we'll just save all the audio there. So I've just got a folder called audio. I'll save that there. And then we're pretty much ready to send it all to Final Cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the prepare BRAW files. And what this is doing behind the scenes is creating all those audio files. Now it says it's successfully processed, and I can drag the green icon next to the button to the Final Cut library. So I basically have this green button here, and I will drag it across, and you can see now it's changed into a library icon. I'll drag it to our library, and all our clips are there. Now the reason it's this weird drag and drop sort of thing is, again, just to get around sandboxing issues. This workflow extension touch anything else on the file system, so it can't access things on the desktop. It can only access things that you need. So even just if I had a button to say send to Final Cut, I'd need to get a whole additional permission thing. So the drag and drop thing just makes life so much easier. And now I have all my BRAW clips here, and you can see it's all here. I'll turn on hover. We can see it's very performant. I can just hover through all this sort of stuff. And there we go. So in this case, I've brought them all in as synchronized clips. There is an option in BRAW Toolbox. You can bring them in as multicams instead. And basically, if I sort of just double click on one of these, we can see what we're doing behind the scenes. So behind the scenes, we have a audio track, and this is just regular audio. If I go reveal in Finder, we can see just a regular WAV file, nothing fancy there. It's been pulled apart from the BRAW file. It's just a regular audio file, so that's good. And this is where sort of the magic's happening. We've basically got, you can't see any thumbnails here, but we can sort of scroll through and we can see our footage. This is actually just a very boring custom solid. It's exactly the same as this custom solid here. We can change the color of it if we wanted to, because it's literally just a custom solid. So I'll just make it red so you can sort of see. And now it updates the thumbnail there. But what we're doing is we're just using this generator as sort of a placeholder, and we apply a BRAW Toolbox effect to it. And the workflow extension does all this to make it work. We can now click show parameters, and we have full access to all the parameters we had in the workflow extension. So we can adjust the ISO and the exposure. One thing you can do, which you can't even do in DaVinci Resolve, is I can keyframe this. So if I add a keyframe there and I'll make it dark again, we can see here, as you'd expect, the keyframes are updating in the inspector and also in the footage. We can do the same thing as we did in that workflow extension, where I'm going to change the gamma to Blackmagic Design Custom. And now I have full access to those custom gamma controls as well. So again, I'll keyframe the saturation. We'll start here and maybe gets here and we get completely desaturated. And there we go. So you get full sort of raw controls. You also get, if we jump into the metadata view, there's a BRAW Toolbox metadata view. If I go back to this clip in the browser, the synchronized clip has all the metadata you could ever want from a camera. Depending on the type of camera, there's all different stuff in here. So you get all the full metadata from the Blackmagic camera. And then, so we never really need to get this into the synchronized clip or the multicam clip unless we want to adjust the raw parameters. But generally speaking, like most people maybe what they'll be changing is they might change it, the gamma and the gamut, and then they'll just do their color grading as they would normally in Final Cut Pro. So if I just create a new timeline, so I'll just create projects, I'll just do 25 because we are Australians. I'll just go tests, and we'll just do an Ultra HD one.
Yay.
I'll just bring in all my footage. And we can see here in the timeline, very performant. And yeah, even
Chris,
these clips. So if we have a look at the metadata, even what do we got? Where's the frame size?
does it require the M1 or M2 chip, or does it work on Intel?
No, it works on Intel. We've got people that are testing it on old 15-inch Intel MacBook Pros. And,
Wow.
The only issue we ever have had so far is there's one user that has a trash can Mac Pro with dual D500s, I think, and he has some glitches, but those old trash cans are so notorious for overheating and destroying GPUs. I'm assuming that he's just got dodgy hardware. But no, it works great on Intel's, works fine on Apple Silicon. Obviously, as you can see in the frame size, we've got some 12K clips, we've got some 5K clips, 6K clips, and yeah, it's all working really well. And the benefit of BRAW is that I can, if we go back to the workflow extension, I'll just bring in something else. We can adjust the decode quality. So at the moment, it's doing an automatic one. So it's basically, because I know I was going to work in HD, I set HD and it will sort of pick the best decoding for that HD delivery. But I can also do automatic Ultra HD or full or half a quarter. So if you're just doing offline editing and you're going to send it to a proper colorist to do a grade or whatever, you could just edit in 8th quality, and it's essentially like proxy quality. Depending on, I mean, if you're shooting 8th quality and you've shot 12K working on a HD timeline, it probably will look fantastic anyway. But so you can, if you've got a really slow machine, you could just work in 8th quality, and then when it comes time to render, one of the cool things we added was there's in here in the inspector, there's global settings. So we can click force full quality decode, and then every clip in Final Cut will render at full quality. And same with 8th. If your computer's struggling for whatever reason, you're doing lots of motion effects, we can just force 8th decode quality, and it'll render out at that sort of decode quality.
Now, Chris, have you heard from Blackmagic about this plugin?
Yeah, I've been chatting with Blackmagic and Apple a lot about this because obviously there was lots of questions because the Blackmagic API is all in C. I've never coded in C before.
Okay.
I've never done anything with Metal before. So yeah, there was a lot of learning and a lot of, hey guys, what is, I don't know how to explain this, but Metal does something. I need to get this into Final Cut somehow. Could you tell? So yes, I've been chatting a lot with Blackmagic's developer support is awesome. They're all based in Melbourne as well. So they're literally just down the road. So they're in my time zone, so that works really well. But yeah, Blackmagic developer support's really great, and the BRAW product managers are really great. So yeah, Blackmagic gives great support, and Apple's been really helpful as well. But obviously they're on the other side of the world.
Yeah. Do they have any offices? Apple have any offices in Australia? I don't even know.
They do.
Corporate
I mean,
office?
we've got Apple stores, and there's some people. There's some engineers also that just work from Australia, but yeah, it's not. Yeah, we don't have a spaceship campus or anything like that.
So speaking of Blackmagic, is anybody going to NAB this year? Any of you guys? Yeah. Well, I'll be there if nothing changes. So if anything changes. But at this point, I got my tickets for the hotel and for the airline, and one of my favorite places to stop. Even though I go there for Final Cut Pro stuff exclusively, almost exclusively, I love the Blackmagic. Half of an acre they have. They just have an incredible,
Yeah,
and
the
they
great thing
and they
about
run
it,
some
like,
great education.
yeah,
No, absolutely.
authentication. And you get to, like, so when the Blackmagic SDK came out, like quite a few years ago, they wanted to add BRAW support to Final Cut. And I thought about ways that it could work, but there was lots of roadblocks. I was just like, the too hard basket. But the great thing about Blackmagic is they've literally got in that sort of the front, in the big booth, they've actually got a developer corner where the engineers that are actually writing all the BRAW code are there, and you can go up and just chat to them. And you'd never see that on an Apple booth. There's no developer corner where you can go up and go, hey, I've got a technical question. Whereas the last NAB I went to before COVID times, I could literally go up and go, hey, I'll open up this code from my email. Can you just have a look and tell me what?
Sure.
And they're like, oh, sure. Like, yeah, they're really excited. They're really happy. So yeah, Blackmagic has really nailed training and really good networking at it. Like, behind their booth, they've also got their like private booth with all the couches, and you can go have meetings, and they've got a coffee machine, that sort of thing. So you can sort of chat to if you're working with Blackmagic stuff, you can go and chat to the actual people that are working on the products and ask technical questions. And but yeah, I had a lot of fun on that booth. I think the year that last time I was there was around the time that they came out with the editor's keyboard. So
Right.
Scott Simmons and I spent a lot of time, because I think what's his name? I'm so bad for not remembering his name, but our Final Cut friend who used to always be on the Blackmagic booth.
Oh, I know who you mean. He's from Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you right
Help me
real
out,
quick.
Ian.
Hold on. Tony Gallardo.
Yeah, Tony Gallardo. So yeah, Tony, Scott, me, we could just sit around. I can fantasize about adding Blackmagic keyboard support, and then a few years later, I was able to add that as well.
Right. No, that's where I met you, Chris, was at that NAB.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the good thing is, here's a couple of good things for this year. CES, which just happened in January, they were hoping for 100,000 attendees, which is below their normal. They had 115,000. 15,000 above their most optimistic estimate. So last year, NAB had 54,000, down from something in the 90s. So I presume it's going to be back up, closer to normal as well this year. So that'll be good. But it was great last year. I mean, it wasn't quite as crowded by a little bit, but Blackmagic still had their great booth. Plenty of people were there. Apple was not there, of course, officially, but of course, some of the team was there because I spoke with them and different things. But I'm wondering here's my philosophy, my theory is that 10.7 comes out right before NAB, the same way that 10.6.2 came out right before NAB did last year. That's when we got those two features right before NAB, like end of March or beginning of April. So 10.7 comes out before NAB, and there's something to talk about. You get all that free buzz, NAB buzz, if you have something to talk about. So, Apple, if you're listening.
I don't think Apple cares or matters, or it matters for the wider ecosystem of all the users. I think, like, my uneducated guess would be that we'll see Mac Pros around WWDC. They'll have to update Final Cut to work with whatever crazy stuff they're going to do in the new Mac Pros. So we'll probably see a Final Cut update around WWDC time. But having said that, maybe Apple won't want to highlight the Mac Pro, so they might just do what they did with the MacBook Pros recently and just do a press release and invite a few specific people.
Well, they did it. They did a video, 20-minute video.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it was a bigger produced one than.
Here's the problem
releases.
with doing it at WWDC. That's Apple specific. NAB is the world of broadcasting. It's much, much, much broader than WWDC, which is Apple Developers Conference. It reaches a lot more people, and they did it last year. And they've done it for ProRes RAW, and they've done it multiple times. They've released updates right in time for NAB. So I expect them to do the same thing this year.
Yeah, they have done that before. I was there in 2015. I may or may not have gotten hold of Final Cut the night before it came out from someone, but that didn't happen. Obviously, it was great, and it was nice to have something to talk about that was nicely timed and video specific. But I don't know that this happens every year. I think it's one of those things which, if the stars align, then it'll happen maybe, because there are a few times of the year where it's nice to have a new release. Certainly,
Absolutely.
we've seen it at the summit where we've had a new release come out just before then, or NA. And to be fair with Apple's developer support, if you have a question around WWDC,
Exactly.
you can get direct developer help. I have had direct developer help through video chat with people on the Apple Watch team for questions with my Apple Watch app. So it is possible to get direct code help. I've had that a couple of times because I think I'm a worse programmer than you, Chris. It's my C is 20 years old. You are way more up to date.
Yeah,
Probably
I will say
not
that
someone from the Final Cut, but yeah, the Video Toolbox team maybe in the API.
Yeah.
That would,
Yeah.
What were you saying, Chris?
But I will say that I did have, so Apple has been running a lot of developer initiatives, especially at the end of last year. So I did sign up for one of those ones and got to spend, I think it was like 40 minutes maybe, chatting to a Apple developer evangelist who's based in Australia. So this was, I think, in November maybe or December. So I got to ask like a billion questions about how the App Store works, how the process works, how best to promote things, that sort of thing. So either Apple has really good developer support. It was really great to just have a chat to someone that's local and understands all that thing. And the Final Cut team's great. I spam them regularly with questions and technical questions, and they can't always answer. Or most of the time they can't answer because I'm doing stuff that's never been done before, or
Right.
But they are accessible. Like they are listening to everything I say. They don't always reply with answers, but even given time zones, I get emails from some of the Final Cut team at pretty much
I get
straight
more
away.
response from the Logic team than I do from Final Cut Pro team through the portal.
Right.
Through the portal. I've gotten responses. I've been working with the Logic team on some things. So here's a question for everybody. I'm sure everybody has an opinion. So we had 2 feature updates for Final Cut in 2022. Is that the new normal? 2 per year? Because it's going to be 2 in March. Are we accepting 2 feature updates per year for Final Cut? I'm not.
I think Apple just always does whatever they want to do when they want to do it.
Of course. But we don't have to accept it, though. We don't have to say, that's okay. That's okay, Apple. You did a great job releasing 2 feature updates in 1 year. I mean,
but
they're
it's
both...
not going to stop you from using Final Cut. It's not going to stop any of us from using Final Cut. So I don't know if it really...
of course not. But the point is that the new normal? Is that what they're going to be doing?
I think it depends a lot on the hardware they've got coming out at the time, the Mac OS updates that are coming out at the time. There's been rumors that a lot of the developers had to move away from other departments because of all the AR, VR headset stuff they're doing in the video space. So I think it really depends on what's happening. They'll do it as quickly as they can and they'll do as much as they can do, but they don't have to answer to anyone because they've got so much money and so much power and so much control.
I don't think the Final Cut Pro team does. I think Tim Cook's couch does. I think they have Tim Cook's couch has all the change, whatever. You pick up his cushions and all the coins are there. But even though he took a $50 million pay cut last year, still.
Remember, also, this is potentially the year for VR. WWDC is not going to be focused on Final Cut. It may be mentioned as a tool for, hey, if you want to make some VR 360-degree video or something like that, then, this is a great tool to, maybe make a trailer or something that plays in 360 degrees. So I don't think that feature, which was introduced a few years ago, is going to go away. I think it's going to see more use, but I don't think Apple's going to focus on Final Cut for WWDC. I think, I hope it comes out before then. NAB is a nice idea. That sounds great.
Right.
I mean, I'm really looking forward to, Apple's headset doing what everyone else has not quite managed to do and doing it better. And look, as VR has failed for so many different reasons in so many different ways, but mostly because most VR headsets have solved a problem which people didn't have. So it's like, wow, you can do this really cool immersive thing, but people don't care about that immersive thing. It's too hard to experience the immersive thing, or it's really cool, but they can't see how to integrate. The difference which I think Apple's going to have with a VR headset, which does impact us as video editors, is that, and the rumors are saying this was going to happen and it was always going to happen, virtual screens. Now, you can get virtual screens if you get like a Quest Pro today. And by virtual screens, I mean you're wearing a headset and you can see a giant screen in front of you, as big as you want. Now, if Apple do this, the difference will be it won't have a huge amount of latency, because that's one thing that Apple have nailed with all their accessories, like these things I'm wearing now. It's much quicker. It's much more reliable. There's not going to be a huge lag between moving your mouse and seeing that virtual screen change. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting if Apple nail that. And obviously they go a lot further. Why are we tied to, a 6K screen? Why don't I put this app on this wall? And this, when I walk to the kitchen, my calendar appears on the wall there, because Apple can nail all that as well if they want to. Most other people can't integrate as well. So I would love to see VR, AR done right. I'm really hoping that the rumors of $3,000 are just like the rumors of when the iPad came out and they said it's going to be $1,000 and then it was $500. I'm really, really, really hoping it's not $3,000 US, because that's like 5,000 something here, and that's
ridiculous.
Crazy. That's a whole that'll be too much money for the vast majority of people. And yet, if it replaces the need to buy a cinema display, people can justify that. That's the thing. That could be the thing. But look, I look forward to doing more 360 stuff. I look forward to getting more use out of this. I will be using this on a client job in just a short amount of time, because I've got to do a how to get to my office and a video next week.
Okay.
And that means taking a 360 degree camera out of the client's sunroof as we actually drive along. It's going to be awesome.
That's fantastic.
Not delivering 360 degree video, but this thing has done some really interesting things recently. It's been very useful. And yeah, lots of fun.
So Lee, let me ask you a question. Do I get a Sony a7S4 or do I get a Lumix S5 2X? Tell me. Those are my two choices right now.
Lumix, you've already got the lenses.
No, the L mounts. The L mounts.
So it's different mount already.
Yeah.
No, I'd go with the Lumix. It's one of the things. Fine. So I shoot mostly Sony. I've been shooting Sony for over a decade now, probably almost a decade now. I've got a lot of money invested in the lenses, so I'm not going anywhere from Sony.
Right.
And you get great footage out of them, but the UI and the menus on the Lumix, I think, are the best out there in terms of they're far more customizable than any other camera system. And I find them a lot more intuitive than most other camera systems, except for the focus thing that obviously I didn't find that Ian just told me about.
But that's changed.
But I mean, because the new ones have got the new phase. Is a phase detect focus that they've got? Anyway, they've got the better focus.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're already familiar with the Lumix. Go with the Lumix.
So here's the things that, because I have a whole Lumix page up of all the dozens and dozens and dozens of videos for the Lumix S5 II, and the X isn't out yet. That's one of the good things. Still have time to decide because it's not coming out till the middle of May, end of May. So if Sony introduced an A7 IV or something, I would consider it. Here's the things that Lumix has that I really, really like. Shutter angle, okay? 6K 10-bit in-camera recording, ProRes RAW and BRAW via HDMI, internal ProRes recording, anamorphic.
Also, Richard, let me tell you another thing. The fact that they do internal ProRes is huge because so on this job that I had in New Zealand, so normally on jobs I'll be shooting with my Sonys, but I'll be capturing to a Ninja 5 Plus. So I'll be capturing ProRes or ProRes RAW to the Ninja 5 Plus. This particular job that I did in New Zealand was a lot more run and gun, and I was working on the client's schedule as opposed to the client working on my schedule. So basically I had a backpack, and whatever I could carry in the backpack, that's what I was shooting with. And we were on a really tight schedule, so I didn't have time to have, normally I'd have my FX6 and it'd be rigged up, and it was too much to slip around.
Sure.
So I just had my A7S Mark III on a strap and just capturing whatever bloody format the Sony's capture internally. And it's okay, but just the fact that I wasn't capturing ProRes and I had to change some stuff into ProRes then when I got it into Final Cut.
Right.
Even just that wasn't a huge deal because Final Cut.
But it's still something, sure. Still...
Exactly. So if the fact that I can get internal ProRes on the Lumix, that is going to make your life a lot easier.
And here's some other things. External monitor and viewfinder at the same time, which Sony does not have. It has active cooling, so there's no time limit anymore. Open gate full sensor readout, which we've already talked about. The new one has 10 custom LUTs. You can add custom LUTs, and you can burn it into the video file in camera if you want to. It has USB power and charging at the same time. Hot swap the cards, USB SSD recording. This is something new. Line level mic input. So if you're coming from a mixing board, you can switch it to line level.
But if I can just, for the sake of all editors out there, and particularly colorists, unless you're working on a quick turnaround, please don't burn your LUTs in.
No, of course. No, this is more for social media if you want to do it quickly.
That's fine.
One of the other things is that I just saw, you can scrub your videos in camera with your hand when you pull them up. You can scrub through them. You don't have to play them all the way through. This is something else that's brand new. I mean, you can touch it and then scrub.
I think doesn't the GH6 do that? I thought I did that on the GH6.
I'm talking about versus Sony.
So. I'll test it now.
Versus Sony.
Versus Sony. Yeah, the Sonys don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but then again, when you're as brilliant as I am, you don't have to preview what you've just shot. You know it's good.
Of course.
No, it's no. Look, I agree with all of that. The Lumix is good.
Yeah, I'm obviously joking. I shoot rubbish all the time. If you ever see one of my final edits, and there's this beautiful sort of black and white, high contrast kind of noir look that we've done, it means I stuffed up the color and I couldn't fix it in post.
Well, there you go. There you go. So I'm excited for the Lumix S5 Mark II X. I'm not getting just the 2. I definitely want the X. It also has USB streaming and some other additions, but it's amazing. It's $2,200 here in the U.S. $2,200.
Does it have a gyroscope?
I don't know. Maybe Ian knows.
I think
it's got really good stabilization built in.
I
don't think you can get access to the gyro data, but it's got sensor stabilization. Most of the lenses have optical lens stabilization as well. There's digital stabilization if you want that. And it's all just corrected in camera. So if you're using any kind of native lens, then any distortion in the lens is also corrected in camera natively as well. So you don't really need to do any of that stuff afterwards. You get clean, stable footage. It is really very nice. And the anamorphic thing is huge. That's they call
Yes.
it anamorphic in the menu,
Yes,
but
it is.
it's open gate. So if you need to deliver portrait and widescreen, shooting open gate is so much better than any other option. Otherwise, you just have to shoot really wide if you've only got a widescreen camera. And almost nobody else offers this. Fujifilm does.
If you have any questions
Otherwise,
about
it's
the Lumix,
Red.
I have this master list, which I always do. Master list of all the videos. Look at these videos for the Lumix S2, and the X isn't even out yet, but all these videos, incredible stuff. A lot of these people compare it to the Sony A7S 4 and 3. Some of them compare it to the Lumix, the original Mark II, the original S5. But look at all these videos. It's just incredible. It's just like never ending. It's incredible. I really enjoy. I mean, I've been in the market for a camera, but not, immediate. And I'm looking at the Sonys. I'm saying, okay, if I'm going to switch, I want to go full frame. That's one thing I want. If I'm going to switch lenses, I'm thinking I probably should go with Sony because I like all the Sony lenses and stuff. But then this thing came out, and I'm like, wow. So I'm now going to switch to L mount, but I'm not going to get like a dozen lenses like I do. I have probably like 6 or 7 for my GH5 and GH4. I'm not going to get that many, but I'm going to start out with the same Sigma. It's 24 to 75 zoom at f2.8. So that's a good starting point. Ian, what lens did you have at the Creative Summit in 2019 on your GH5?
It was probably this one. This
Okay.
is my workhorse lens for most of the time, which is an Olympus 12 to 40.
Okay.
It's nice because it has a clutch manual focus, so you can pull back and get proper manual focus, or you can leave it in autofocus mode. It's very nice. It's constant f2.8. It's really good. I use it a lot, but I did recently get a Metabones adapter, or not, well, the Viltrox speed booster equivalent. And that's why I'm going to pick up this 18 to 35, because, it gives you more
Right.
light. It lets you access EF lenses. I used to have Canon, so I've got, this absurd 30mm 1.4, which becomes about a 22mm f1.0,
Right.
which is ridiculous. And that's proper full frame levels of blur, as long as you, don't care about video autofocus or anything. Once you're adapting lenses, you just want to manually focus.
No,
really.
I definitely wanted better autofocus. It's one of the things I was holding out for. That's why I was looking at Sony. I want the two things: low light performance and better autofocus. That's why this Lumix is really, really attractive. So right now, that's what
Can I
I'm
take
going to
you
get.
down
I've got
another rabbit hole?
Pardon?
Can I take you down another rabbit hole?
Sure. Let me pull you up here.
Let me share my screen again.
Okay, here we go.
So in addition to BRAW Toolbox, there's an open source program called GyroFlow, which is amazing. It can take the gyroscope data from a whole heap of cameras, GoPro, Sony's, Insta360, DJI stuff, Blackmagic, Red files, and you can stabilize stuff. And it's a standalone app. It's completely free. The developer is a genius. It's amazing. But I want it to work in Final Cut easier, especially with Blackmagic RAW. So I've released another program called GyroFlow Toolbox, which is on the App Store. You can buy it now. It came out this morning. And basically, it's just an effect for to apply GyroFlow projects. So this is just a sample clip. This is just from the GyroFlow website, just a Sony A7S III. And I've just put it into a compound clip. I'll just turn off the effect and just sort of scrub through so you can sort of see the shot. Like it's a pretty crazy,
Right, shaky.
a pretty crazy shaky for the purposes of testing. No one would ever do this except maybe Lee if he had it on some robotic arm that went out of control.
Just stick it to my 7-year-old.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Just tie it to his
If
head.
I put on, so I've already got a Gyroflow project using the Gyroflow app. I've just imported it in here, and now if I play it, and we can see what the stabilization's doing and how smooth it is compared to what you could ever do with Final Cut stabilization. Even that sort of, like, it's maintaining it crazy. So this is another great sort of tool.
Damn you,
Chris.
Chris! I just gave you more money.
Chris, that is fantastic. But the camera has to support giving you the gyro data.
Correct. So it's taking the gyroscope data, and I didn't do any of the maths, like the Gyroflow project. The developer there is literally a genius, and he does all the stuff, all the actual hard work. I just brought it into Final Cut with his help.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can literally stabilize it. This is just a one-click sort of thing in Gyroflow to bring it in. And then as you can see, it's very performant. And the stabilization's crazy. And I can adjust like the field of view and lens correction. You can see it's doing some lens correction there. I don't know if, smoothness adjusts as well. So yeah, throwing it out there, Sony cameras have built-in stabilization, as do Blackmagic RAW, the Pocket 4K and 6K, 8K, I don't know, one of them, and the Red Komodo and that sort of thing. So this is a really handy tool if you have a camera that has built-in gyro and you're working in Final Cut.
There is one additional option which I've tried out but haven't been able to get working properly, which is to use a gyroscope app on an iPhone, because iPhones have gyros as well. That's how they stabilize their footage, though for them it's all built in. So what you could theoretically do is very firmly glue your iPhone to your camera, start the gyroscope app recording some data, then move your camera around crazy style, and then pull the gyro data from your iPhone and hook that into Gyroflow, cross your fingers and hope that it works. Now, I tried this and it failed, but I'm fully willing to accept the blame for that not working. Now, I think the Blackmagic stuff needs to be applied in post, because Blackmagic just want to record that pure image and then they do it in post. Question for you, Lee. Does the gyro data from a Sony camera get applied at any point in the chain? Like, does Catalyst Browse do it, or does it just get ignored, or does the camera do it itself somehow? I'm just curious.
I believe you can do it in Catalyst Browse, but otherwise it's the only place that I know you can access it.
Yeah, you definitely can access it in Catalyst. Whether or not, I think, and again, I'm not a Sony expert or anything like that, but I believe there's different settings. So, for example, on some cameras, you need to turn off like the built-in stabilization for the gyroscope stuff to be stored. So like GoPros, you have to be in certain settings for the gyro stuff to be stored. Otherwise it gets burnt in. I guess it's kind of like LUTs. You can either sort of burn it in or save it for later. Gyroflow also they work closely with another, like an open source hardware solution. A little magic box that you put on your camera and it records all the gyro data, and then you can bring that in. So, there's lots of different options. But in terms of, especially with BRAW Toolbox, I mean, the only reason I found out about Gyroflow Toolbox was someone asked me, I want the stabilization the same as Resolve. And I was like, there's no way I have the skills to do it. But turned out some other smart person has done it, and I can just sort of do the Final Cut side and sort of bring that in. And there's also a DaVinci Resolve plugin that works really well. But for example, with the Blackmagic RAW gyro stabilization, Resolve actually, it uses the gyro data from the camera, but it also puts it through its neural engine. So it's all machine learning based, and it's very clever how it sort of stabilizes it. It's not just taking the gyro data and just using that data to manipulate the image. It actually goes through the neural engine and does all kinds of maths and correction to make that really perfect, and lens correction and all that kind of stuff.
Here's what I'm looking at right now. Let me pull this up. Can you see Wait a minute. You can't see my screen, can you?
Nope.
No, it sort of
What
flashed
the
on and
heck?
flashed off.
Ah, this. You know what? Stream Deck is not. There you go. This is what I'm looking at right now. So this is Ecamm Live, the interface. I have a preview monitor, a program monitor, sound levels. I have scenes. I have the guest on the one side over there. I have another. This is what I'm. One-man band. I'm doing this by myself. I have no assistant editors. I've kind of gotten the rhythm down. I've kind of gotten it down. I can do this pretty effectively. But it's a great application, Ecamm Live. They don't pay me. They're only going to try to get them to sponsor me for NAB. We'll see how that happens. So what else is going on over there in Australia with in regards to Final Cut? Anything Final Cut? Ian, are you doing any in-person training over there for Final Cut?
Oh, not a whole lot, but I've never really done a whole lot of in-person training because
Okay.
there's never been a massive demand. Even Final Cut Classic days, I know taught it several times, taught group classes, individuals, but yeah, look, in-person training has always been. It's something that happens, just not terribly often, and I
Right.
think that's one of the things which is handy about online training is that it's a lot easier to fill a class when people A can be at home in their pajamas and B can be at several different homes in several different pajamas all at the same time.
Yeah.
It's much easier. But no, look, what is happening? Well, no, not a whole lot. I mean, I liked that Resolve came out on the iPad, and that there was a cute little hack to connect a keyboard and get the full Resolve interface. I think that's informative as to why Final Cut Pro doesn't exist on the iPad just yet.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Not great.
What are all your opinions about Final Cut being on the iPad? I mean, I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. If it's there, it's there. Do I expect it? Probably at some point. But I don't think it'll be the same version as a desktop. I think it'll be a Final Cut Lite or a Final Cut iPad or whatever, because there's too many issues. Like I always say, how do I hook up my 56 terabyte RAID? How do I port over my thousands and thousands of plugins that I have? I'm not buying them all over again for an iPad version because I'm probably not going to edit on the iPad version, except for occasionally. So what do you guys think?
The plugin thing's easy. I mean, Motion VFX have already done that for Resolve. You can now install Motion VFX plugins for DaVinci Resolve on iPad.
All of them?
Well, the ones that they've built for Resolve.
But I'm talking about Final Cut ones. I have thousands.
Well, Final Cut, the engine in iOS and iPad OS, like all the effects, motion effects. Everything that you can do on iMovie on a Mac translates perfectly over to iMovie on an iOS or iPad device. So the effects will come across fine. Things like BRAW Toolbox, that's a lot more complicated because they'd have to build workflow extensions and FX plug and all that kind of stuff. But it's all theoretically possible.
Now, what about connecting my RAID with your Thunderbolt?
Well, the RAID, you'll just have to get a more modern... If you had a hardware RAID, it would work. You can plug in a big hardware RAID into an iPad. You can plug in a thing and it'll just work as long as it appears as a generic storage device. You can plug anything into an iPad.
No, all my RAIDs require drivers from the manufacturers, every one.
Well,
for the Mac. So they're not making it for the iPad, I don't believe.
Well, if it was just a generic driver, like a generic storage device that works on Mac, Windows, that sort of thing, it will just work on an iPad.
Promise, G-Tech, SoftRAID, they all require separate drivers, each one.
Yeah, but SoftRAID, that's why I'm saying you need a hardware-based RAID. Promise works a bit differently because it's a hardware RAID. The drivers aren't doing the storage stuff. They're doing the device management stuff.
Okay.
So that's a limitation that I'm sure they could easily fix if they wanted to go onto iPad.
If they wanted to.
Yeah.
But I also need two Thunderbolt ports then, so I have one to charge and stuff.
Yeah, you just get a OWC dock and bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah, it's surprising what an iPad Pro can do these days. recently I went on holiday in New Zealand to the other island that Lee went to, and my initial plan was to take my iPad Pro and take a hard drive and take a little dock with me, because I figured out you can actually do all the backups from an SD card and copy it straight to an SSD to do in the field backups without a Mac. Now, I ended up just taking my laptop anyway, and no regrets. Who cares? It's a bit of weight and it's an awesome screen, and yeah, that's all. It's all terrific, and I got to do some editing and stuff while I was away. But it is possible to do. It's just not fun to do because the screen's not big enough. If you can't rely on a keyboard and mouse, it's going to be slow. The process is going to be bad. Everyone who doesn't care about iPad Final Cut Pro is going to be annoyed at the Final Cut Pro team for wasting time making something they don't want to use.
Absolutely.
Now, at the recent summit, I said, well, no, they're probably not going to do it for all these reasons. And then Chris said, oh, I think they will. I think they've already started. And I've looked at the code and it's like, oh, God damn it. So, maybe it is going to happen. I don't mind. It'll have uses. Just like Resolve for iPad is probably going to be great on a film set. Like I can see a 12.9-inch iPad Pro and instantly being able to get a color accurate reference that you can just show the director. Ah, lovely. Gimme. Yes, that'd be perfect. I see it. But again, none of us.
I think it's generational as well. Like my wife does she doesn't have a laptop. She doesn't have a thing. She just has an iPad and a phone.
Sure.
And she does everything on the iPad. And she does stuff that I can't. Like I'm so old school. I literally have 3 laptops because I have my email on one laptop because I don't like the software on the newer versions. I'm that rooted into the old school ways of doing things.
But
she does everything. She'll do. Sorry?
Does she use a keyboard and a mouse with the iPad?
No, just a normal iPad. But she'll do all her schoolwork, banking, emails, signing contracts, redesigning 3D layouts for house things, controls the sprinklers outside.
What about in another 10, 15 years when her eyes are as bad as mine?
Bars.
Well, then
Make that
put the
plural.
AR thing in your brain, and it'll sort itself out. You'll just say, "Hey,
voice control."
ChatGPT."
Voice control.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
it doesn't scale. It doesn't scale. Sorry to interrupt. It doesn't scale like big time. That's the problem. Like if you go for an iPad or iPhone, you have to go with what has been planned for you. I've got an iMac sitting here connected to 2 massive RAIDs. I have over 2 terabytes of images, and I'm able to use a Mac app called Peakto, Peakto, to provide a meta view on about 20 different iPhoto, Aperture, and Lightroom libraries all at once.
Right.
Now, that is completely impossible on an iPad. It can't be done. I cannot pay Apple enough money to store all my photos, and they'd have to be in one library to get them on iCloud Photos. So there is a point past which it is utterly impossible to just use an iPad. And I know plenty of people who, my wife, again, doesn't use a laptop very often, but when she needs a keyboard, we do have that spare family laptop which gets brought out. I don't know how people function without a keyboard. Every time I pick up my iPad
I agree.
and use one of the very nice Affinity apps which exists on iPad as well, it's like, yeah, this is great, except switching tools, which I've got 20 years of muscle memory pressing a key, going bang, brush, bang, whatever, and now I have to click with my pencil every single time, or just get a keyboard. It's like, come on, no. It's too slow.
I guess my wife doesn't know any better. Like she's a hardcore Affinity user, and she didn't even know that it had a Mac app or she just does it on an iPad and has an Apple Pencil and does booklets, graphic design, all kinds of stuff. And things like if she just needed to cut like a video together, she would just use apps that I've never heard of and just do it, and would do it as quick as I could do in Final Cut. Because it's all
Chris. Quite frankly, this just shows that your wife, because it sounds like she's eating pancakes and no one's ever told her about maple syrup.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, I mean, some of the stuff that she spits out of the iPad is just incredible stuff. And I guess, and she's a primary school teacher, so she's working with like young kids as well. And I think it's just a generational thing. I think you say that you can't get, like, you can't have lots of storage on the iPad or whatever, but we've got every single family photo and every single family photo that we've ever had all on iCloud that auto magically is there on all our family devices. And
You
if she
haven't taken
needs
enough photos yet. Like you haven't hit that point where you've got the 450 gig aperture library, which was too big to update anymore.
Yeah, but we always shot on.
Oh, pshaw, Ian. I'm this one. So, Ian, how big is your photo library?
The biggest one I got is 450 gig, and now I make a new one every 6 months. Total is over 2 terabytes.
Yeah, dude, you got
just photos, not videos.
Up your game, mate. So my photo library at the moment is not as big as that. It's 1.4 terabytes. And I've got 4 terabytes of storage on my iCloud, which, to be fair, was very complicated to organize. But you can get up to 4 terabytes of storage on iCloud, so you can get there.
I do have an issue with being forced to pay for storage every single year for the rest of your life, or you'll lose your photos.
You can also use you can use network attached storage. So I could have a Synology NAS in the house, and the iPad accesses it all.
All this is true, Chris. But as soon as I get to a point where I need to do something fancy and scriptable, something which the iPad isn't going to let me do, that's when I'm just going to be really, really, really frustrated. It's always the little things which are harder than they should be to do. It's like, can I make an automator action so I can just right-click and turn anything into a JPEG? I used that 50 times yesterday.
Ian, I agree with you, but we're just grumpy old men.
Oh, that's fine.
The other thing is, if Final Cut is going to come to the iPad, but I think it's going to be a different version than the desktop version. I think it's going to be a light version or Final Cut for the iPad. I would say if they're going to do that with the touch interface, they're probably going to have the MacBook Pro touchscreen, because that's what they've been talking about recently, that it's coming forward. So I think maybe both of those at the same time. Now, here's the thing. At one point, I wanted the MacBook Pro touchscreen, but it's not for constant use. It's just for some things. You still have a keyboard, you still have a trackpad, but some things you can touch and drag around on screen, not constantly. People say, oh, your arms are going to be out like this the whole... No, keyboard and mouse. I mean, Final Cut, the keyboard shortcuts are immensely powerful. Can't live without keyboard shortcuts. So you got to have a keyboard for the iPad, period. There's no way I can do it without them. I'm not going to be touching the screen, menus for all the shortcuts. I got to have a keyboard and a mouse, trackpad. Now I'm in a MacBook Pro. Now I'm in a touchscreen MacBook Pro.
I agree with you 100%. It's funny. Even now, every now and again, I'll reach out to touch my laptop screen, and I go, oh, wait, no, not touch screen.
All the time.
And I definitely agree with you about if Final Cut, a version of Final Cut comes to iPad and iPhone OS. And again, this is, we're imposing our personal experiences, and we always have to remember that just because this is the way that we use it doesn't mean this is the way that everyone else uses it, and all that kind of stuff. But at least for my use case, all I need on an iPad is iMovie for iOS, but that just gives me a bit more control over the timeline. So almost like a cut page from Resolve, but a Final Cut version. So like a magnetic timeline version of the cut page. So I can just do quick, just put stuff on the timeline, move it around, and then when I get home, I export the XML, bring it into Final Cut, and then we get busy.
Right.
And I would just use it the same way that we use Lumberjack. Like at the moment, we use logging stuff on set. It'd be great if we could just do it straight into Final Cut. use Frame.io's camera to cloud workflow. Everything's just in Final Cut. It's all automatically sunk, same as you will be able to do in DaVinci with the Blackmagic's cloud solution. And then it all starts to make sense.
There is an example, though, of the problem which we've got at the moment with mobile first and to a lesser extent tablet first workflows. If you look at the Insta3 app, they have a mobile app which does all these amazing AI things which don't exist in the desktop app. Now, the problem is the mobile first stuff for the Insta360 stuff does all these really nice fancy things, but they're all template based. So, for example, a lot of them might just override the audio and put their music in place. And it's the same music every time you run it. And it's like, okay, I can't possibly use this. Nobody can use this more than once. They have to edit this and strip out the music. But they don't exist in the desktop app at all. So the mobile version has been optimized for where most of the users are, which is a quick thing done for social media as a gimmick. We're done. And that's the problem. A lot of the stuff that's being designed for mobile first is not designed for us at all. It's not designed for people who want more out of the software. Sometimes, yes, you can get a bit of data rate control, so you're not just putting something YouTube ready out, but you can't do ProRes. You can't turn the music off. And so you end up with this weird system of the simple and the cool stuff available on the iPhone app and the pro stuff and the complex stuff, but none of the smart stuff or some of the smart stuff available in the desktop app. Now, that's a real shame because I want the smart stuff in high resolution without the template music, please. And that's simply not possible at the moment. So I really want the iPhone app released for Apple Silicon for the Mac, which would be not something difficult for them to do. I guess the reason they don't want to do it is there is a little bit of work to do it, and it would lift up the Mac experience so far above the Windows experience that they probably don't want to set that precedent. And but it's very frustrating that, the mobile experience ends up being ahead of the desktop experience in some ways, but really lacking in raw quality. That's annoying.
But then
But
you've
you've
got,
also-
like on the... You go, Lee.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, on the flip side, everything you just said is counteracted by DaVinci Resolve, which is running full Resolve with ProRes plugins on an iPad that performs as well on a MacBook Pro.
Absolutely the exception, not the rule. And I wish it was more like that.
But
even
I think
if
that's
it's
the
not
start.
terribly useful without a keyboard and mouse. You kind of need a keyboard and mouse to get the most out of Resolve
No, absolutely.
on the iPad. That's why Apple's not doing it, because they don't want to demand people have a keyboard and mouse. Most manufacturers have gone the other way and said, right, well, it's got to be usable on a phone in vertical, and people have got to be able to make something for TikTok, and that's it. That's all we want to care about. That's the only use case.
But I think that's where
targeting.
Blackmagic's headed. That's why they team up with Motion VFX, because once you've got incredible Motion VFX stuff on an iPad and you need to do fast turnaround client stuff for TikTok, where you need to do a fashion festival and you need to turn around videos like instantly after the event that's going to 10 million, 100 million TikTok followers. You've suddenly got awesome effects. You can do it all on the iPad. You shoot it on the iPad because the cameras are decent. I think there's a whole world of marketing people that are already just using iPhones and iPads to do all the stuff to TikTok and Instagram and social networks that I don't even know exist.
Please.
Now,
So I
wait
think
a
there's
minute.
already...
For the
One
love of
thing.
all that's good and pure in the world, do not shoot with an iPad camera. Don't. Please don't.
It's bad. It's really bad.
Light is not your friend in that circumstance. Don't, please.
Well,
don't.
let me just say one thing about the Final Cut coming to the iPad. I never even considered it coming to the iPhone. I only expected it to come to the iPad. If you guys think it's going to come to the iPhone, what is that? I mean, LumaFusion does a great job with their version, but that started on Mac OS, iOS, and it started on the iPad and iPhone. But I can't
I would
imagine Final Cut
expect-
coming to the iPhone.
No, I don't think so. I think I would only imagine Apple will do what they always do and it'll be only for the top end iPad Pro. It'll be
Okay.
a Pro product, a Pro device.
That makes more
That's
sense.
what I would think. And it'll be something tied in. Maybe it's tied in with all this AR, VR stuff, that it'll do something unique that can't be done on a Mac, and that'll be the selling point. And it might be something like they obviously spent a lot of time in developing 360 stuff, which died and doesn't really even work anymore because the hardware manufacturers don't even support Final Cut anymore.
No, the 360 stuff is good. The VR headset stuff is not so good because Steam VR died, I think, and the Vive, they pulled their driver for the Mac. So yeah, the headset stuff is difficult, but the 360 stuff still works really well. And I would imagine that, yeah, if Apple do a headset, all that support will come roaring back. And yeah, I can't wait to see some of these 360 photos I've been taking as a full immersive experience again, because, you know, loading them onto an Oculus Go is not the same. You really don't get the same experience. But, you know, I mean, you cannot beat taking a photo in the middle of a New Zealand, at the end of a walk where there's glaciers over there and mountains over there, and suddenly you can just look everywhere. It is really a special thing, and I really want to see, I want to be able to have a whole lot more of that.
And particularly you can, the great thing about these little 360 cameras is you can do stuff. So when we were in when I was in New Zealand for the job, it was a last minute job, so I didn't have time to get permits and stuff for my drone. So I just took a really long selfie stick. I'm talking like 3-4 meters. So we're talking 10-15 feet. And like some of the stuff that we did is we were on the cable car up to the top of the mountain in Christchurch, and we just stuck the thing out the window of the cable car, so it looks like the drone is following the cable car down and following it up. And we were on a glacial lake, on speedboats zipping around icebergs. And again, if I gotten permission to fly the drone, it would have been so cool, but I didn't. So I just had this. I had a drone effectively. The quality wasn't as good as a drone, but it was totally usable. Just going back a step. One of the points that what Ian was talking about, what I wanted to say was the other thing to keep in mind about, if companies developed one app for iOS, let's say, and the Mac app isn't that good, but for people like us, we want a better Mac app because we could do so much more with it. At the end of the day, it also comes down to money and resources, where they can, the company could look at it and go, well, look, we could spend X amount of resources to develop a Mac app that has all the same features that a mobile app has, but the amount of people that are going to need that, the amount of people that are going to use that, it's not really worth the money for us. So as much as we want it, I can see why a company would look at that. I mean, like Chris could probably talk to this. I mean, I'm guessing, BRAW, it's a niche market. Who
knows? I don't. At some point, I guess I get some stats from the App Store. We'll see.
It'll be interesting to see how much money you make from it. But it's not. You're not going to turn into the next Insta360 sort of thing from it. It doesn't have that wide market appeal sort of thing. So I think with all the stuff that we wish for, there's people out there like Chris, because Chris is one of the people like, I wish this could exist. Oh, it doesn't exist? I'll make it exist, which is amazing.
Right,
Thank
absolutely.
goodness for Chris.
Yeah. I think
I think the other thing to keep in mind,
available on the Mac store. Sorry, which is how I'm getting all my Mastodon apps. We don't have Mac Mastodon apps, but we've got iPhone apps that run on the Mac.
Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah,
I think it's also worth noting that DaVinci is really interesting because they're essentially a hardware company. Like Resolve is really an exception where they bought legacy software and for super, super cheap and turned it into something amazing. But the other great thing about the iPad app is it works with the speed editor. So you can have hardware control. You don't have to touch the screen because it's got a speed editor that, like, if you know what an EVS system is, there's every instant replay on sports is generally powered by an EVS, which is just like a speed editor, jog wheel. It's all control based. It's not running on a Mac or Windows. It's a proprietary system. And there's probably more EVS editors in the world than hardcore professional Final Cut editors or DaVinci Resolve editors, I would guess. Every sports program, every Olympics, everything like that. So yeah, that hardware model where you actually got over Bluetooth, you got the speed editor controlling DaVinci Resolve. You can touch it when you need to, but you can do all your editing with the jog wheel. It's interesting.
But Apple's had already announced we probably got 4 to 5 million Final Cut Pro editors out there. So I don't think there's that many of the other.
I don't know.
I mean, there's not that many sports programs.
Well, like everything that you see, anything where there's an instant replay, every TV station basically has a whole bunch of EVS systems. It's basically like, imagine like it's basically like a server that's always recording everything with a buffer of however long hours of buffer. So you can, like, if you're doing a football match, it's basically recording everything from every camera all the time, and you can just go back in time on any angle and replay stuff and then clip it up and send it back to playback in broadcast.
So speaking of Final Cut Pro and NAB, so Apple presented, people don't realize, a lot of people outside don't realize, Apple presented at NAB 2017, they presented at NAB 2018 in the Convention Center, official Apple Final Cut Pro presentations, and they did it in 2019 on the Faster Together stage, official Final Cut Pro Apple presentations. They've done it for the last 3 NABs. That's why I think they're going to do something again for this NAB. They've had 3 years to get it together.
Old mate Sam Messman on the show, I'm sure, with all his OWC powers, I'm sure he's cooking up some kind of batshit crazy scheme with. I'm sure there's conversations between OWC, Apple, and FMC to do something somewhere.
Well, they didn't know. OWC did not do anything Final Cut Pro related last time. I stopped at the booth and interviewed Sam, and Sam was clearly concentrating on OWC stuff, although we talked about Final Cut Pro as well. But that was LumaForge who sponsored Faster Together. I don't think OWC is going to do that.
Before Sam, that would be before Sam became officially OWC marketing person, isn't it?
No, it was, but he was the CEO or see something of LumaForge, and he still has financial interest in it. But LumaForge, OWC bought or acquired, whatever you want to say it, LumaForge. But I don't think there's anybody. I have feelers out to different people to see if anybody's sponsoring a Final Cut Pro centric event this time. Nothing's come back yet. I mean, FCP Works is another one. Noah Cadner was the one that put it on prior. I mean, his organization, but of course it's in cooperation with Apple. I mean, everybody knows that. Now in 2016, you were there in 2015, Ian, because I remember you doing a live stream or something, Google Hangout, when you were wandering around the hall on a Sunday night, I think it was. I remember. I'd never been there at that point. Yeah, Sam brought me there.
I did a presentation. Sam Messman was running it, so it was at a hotel just adjacent to the main convention, and I talked about something for core melt. It was tracked color masks for the first time in Final Cut Pro. So we had, you could use the core melt for the tracking and make a mask, and then if you wanted to use color finale inside that, then you could. So that was 2015.
Yeah, they did the same thing in 2016. They were at the hotel across from the convention center. Brad was there with Off the Tracks documentary, the first any kind of showing of a preview of that. So, but 2017, 2018, 2019, Apple has officially been at NAB on the show floor, or in 2019 it was actually at the Super Meet, but they were officially on stage talking specifically about Final Cut Pro. So the last 3, they've been there officially. People say they haven't been there. They have been there.
Well, that's good. More of that, please.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. For 2023, the same thing. Come on back. You've had 3 years, Apple, to do your presentations and rehearsals and do your Final Cut Pro updates, whatever the heck you're doing. So a lot of people do get another comment. A lot of people said they switched to Resolve. They're tired of waiting for Final Cut updates. Listen, NLE editing is not a zero-sum game. You don't have to quit one in order to use the other, except for Premiere. Premiere you have to, because otherwise Final Cut crashes. If you don't wash your hands after using Premiere and go to Final Cut, it crashes. So you have to, that's one exception to that rule. But anyway, I'm still
I will
thinking
not say
something's going to happen.
anything bad about Adobe or Premiere. As an Adobe certified expert and someone who's used Premiere to do amazing things, and a lot of After Effects.
No, I understand. I'm just kidding, of course.
Avid, on the other hand, that can.
Well, your wife uses Avid, right?
On her phone.
My wife.
Yeah.
Oh well, she uses, I don't know what she uses. Probably iMovie, I guess. I don't know, or there's lots of apps that I don't even know about. But no, she's all iPad.
But I interviewed your wife, Chris, before I interviewed you, right? Didn't I?
You have never interviewed my wife.
Oh, I thought I did. It was about Avid. It must be somebody else I'm thinking of then.
Yeah. I think I know the podcast you're thinking of, but yeah, not my wife.
So she's an iPad. She uses iMovie on the iPad.
I honestly don't know what she uses, but definitely a lot of affinity. She's been doing like books in it and all kinds of weird and wonderful things. Loves the Apple Pencil. But yeah,
I like the Apple Pencil too.
Computer.
Yeah, I like the Apple Pencil a lot, but I don't want to be doing keyboard shortcuts with it though. You know,
I guess she doesn't do keyboard shortcuts. It's all, like I said, I'm also old, so I don't know how it all sort of works. But yeah, pencil based, touch based, and she just does so. And same with my kids; they can do stuff on my phone that I don't even know how they do it. They like navigate through things, and they're only 5 and 2, but they are so natural to touch devices. They get very frustrated when they go on my computer and they're like typing stuff on the computer, but they can't change like the color of the text in the screen.
Sure.
So yeah, again, I think it's generational. I think
Partially, yes,
kids
absolutely.
that have grown up on touch everywhere, they're gonna demand touch on computers, or they're just not going to buy computers. I mean, a lot of primary schools in Australia, they have like an iPad program rather than like no one has laptops. They just have a whole bunch of iPads.
That kind of changed. Like the high school where my kid goes was iPad for the first 3 years of high school, and now it's just laptops. And it's because if the teachers don't have iPads, then they can't set iPad specific lessons, and they won't, and because they have regular laptops that were on regular laptops and maybe actually don't work on iPads at all. So it is possible. Have I frozen now? No, there we are. So it is possible to do stuff that's iPad specific and which is iPad heavy, and which can be really excellent, but it really does require a lot of commitment from teachers and students. And sadly, a lot of schools just go with lowest common denominator. Can it run Word? Can it go on the web to access the few websites that we haven't firewalled and blocked? And basically that just means a cheap garbage laptop that runs Windows is your lowest common denominator, and that's all
Surface
everyone
Pros.
gets. Oh, much worse than Surface Pros. I mean,
Oh, no, Ian,
no, Surface.
Yeah. We did that job last year in Toowoomba.
Yeah, but that's a private school where they can tell you what computers you're going to get. And most
Still a
public
school.
schools cannot and will not, and it'll be a $300 machine. That's $300 Australian. That's probably not even a fancy Chromebook. That's like some really ancient version of Windows and a computer that takes minutes to boot up. But
Ian,
that's the
you're in
reality
Queensland.
of
They just
teaching
recent-
for a lot of people.
But Ian, you're in Queensland. They only just recently moved from the Abacus up there, right?
Oh, God.
No, Lee, we're an hour behind, not a decade or a century. I'm sorry.
Well,
Easy jokes, Lee. Easy jokes.
That's the only kind I know.
So what else is going on? Anything else before? I guess the next big event is NAB, right? NAB and then WWDC for people that are into Apple and Final Cut Pro. I don't think, I mean, Well, speaking of that, motion was on the Apple video. When was the last time where they showed motion on the Apple video they did in January for the MacBook Pro? I was like shocked. When was the last time? I don't even think it's ever been on.
It was nice to see it. It hasn't been on very often. It was nice to see it, although, they had a couple of different areas, and they did show After Effects for the professionals using this. And, that is what most professional animators are going to use. They're mostly going to use After Effects, and the more advanced ones are going to use the 3D stuff. And, they're going to use stuff connected to After Effects and 3D modeling in general. And, but there was motion in there. It was nice. They had some nice effects. So look, all of that's positive. It is nice to see really nice animation stuff like motion in use. That's all good. But yeah, look, everything's going to keep diversifying. It is not sensible to know only software from one company. The projects that I've been working on the last week have been designing a digital version of a board game, which I helped to kickstart last year. The animations for that were done in motion. And for the mock-ups, I'm using an app called, which doesn't exist on the iPad. It's Mac only, and it produces HTML animations. But it's terrific if you're doing prototyping of web code, because everything you can see is actually achievable on the web. But I'm just doing the mock-ups and planning the flow and planning how it's going to lay out and how it's going to work. And that's a heap of fun. Be open to non-standard workflows. You will be faced with weird stuff in the next few years. And if you don't know how to do the weird stuff, just ask ChatGPT how to do the weird stuff, and it's going to tell you how to do the weird stuff. And it's going to be wrong, but it'll sound like it knows what it's on about.
It'll sound
if
authoritative.
It's wrong, you just keep asking it until it's right.
The internet, ladies and gentlemen.
Is that artificial intelligence? Is that like Wikipedia? Can people add to it, or is it closed? Some kind of a closed system?
It'll learn on its own eventually.
Is that what it does?
It tries to learn. Yeah,
but it learns from the web, right? It learns from the web, I imagine.
No, it's all
like
feeded in. Yeah, it's machine learning, so it's all data. They basically feed in a data set, and the learns by itself. So ChatGPT is only, is it 2021? It only has a data set up until 2021, so it doesn't access the internet. It doesn't have it doesn't have access to current information.
Okay.
It has whatever the data set was fed into it, and then the neural network. It sort of acts like a human brain. Imagine like a virtual Richard that's read all these books, and then you can ask virtual Richard questions, and it will go, "Oh, I've read that book," and it just puts things together. Sometimes virtual Richard will just be making up crap. Sometimes virtual Richard will get everything right. But
so it doesn't use
a virtual
the internet.
Richard.
It doesn't use the internet at all.
No. Oh, well, it might have pulled the data from the internet in the past, but it's fixed.
Okay.
A fixed
That's
database.
very interesting.
As part of the recent virtual day, there was a 15-second short film contest, which Jeff Greenberg puts on. And so just for fun, I asked ChatGPT to write me a script for a 15-second short film. Now, it gave me a really terrible script. So I asked it again to give me a classier script, and it did. And then I made my short film exactly recreating the ChatGPT script that it gave me and synced it up so that I did the right shot at the right time. It was terrible, but it was a fun experiment, and I recommend, if you've got a few hours free, absolutely ask ChatGPT to write you a script and then go make the film. Because, hey, life is short. Now, at the same time, fun thing you can do, you can do basically the equivalent of an old vanity Google search. So you can ask ChatGPT if it knows who you are. Hang on, this is great. I'm going to do this live. I'm going to ask if ChatGPT knows who you people are. So let's see. Come on. Okay. My session's expired. Log in. No. Okay. Now, when I did this, ChatGPT, the first time, it thought it knew what my book was, except it thought Jeff Greenberg wrote it. And then
Did he write it, Ian? Did he
He
write
did
it?
not. He did not write it. And then I said, no, hang on, Ian this. And then it said, I'm so sorry. Now I see Ian Anderson did write it. It's like, hang on, why were you so confident the first time when you were utterly wrong? It's just ChatGPT is
It's also trying to do
I cannot
stuff.
do this. I'm sorry.
Well, it's also trying to do stuff in real time with 10 million people trying to do it at the same time.
Oh.
So it's not
I
doing
get
it for quality. It's doing it for trying to get the answer out as quickly as possible. And that's what's so brilliant about it. For example, like something like Metal, when I'm doing BRAW Toolbox. Metal, the documentation's crap. Little knowledge about it on the internet. The developer documentation's pretty limited. There's not that many experts that know the deep inner workings of Metal.
Mm-hmm.
So there's literally not a lot of resources for ChatGPT to pull in because the actual developer documentation is very little. But because it has contextual knowledge of a wide range of other topics, it can make up stuff that doesn't exist in the official documentation because it's pulling in resources and learning stuff. And it might give you an answer that's wrong. It'll say, hey, just use this code. It's really, and give you some code. And then you go, well, that code doesn't actually exist. And then it'll go, okay, I'll make it for you. Then it makes it for you and then you can use it. So it's really like having a conversation. It doesn't give you answers right away in the same way that a 5-year-old will never give you the right answer right away. You have to prompt and chat to it. And the nicer you are, the nicer it is back, which is weird. And
okay, I'm asking who you are. I'm in. The thing is, it now has less knowledge of my book than ever before. It doesn't think my book exists at all, which is worse. I think. I'm a bit offended at that, actually.
There's a couple of famous Richard Taylors.
Because it existed in 2020. It existed in 2020, damn it. And it's like, okay, so if your records went up to 2021, it doesn't know who you are, Chris. I am so sorry. Okay.
But you say that, but it can do weird things like you sort of just have to prompt it the right questions. Right. I can't remember the exact example, but it had knowledge of stuff. We did a family holiday where my wife did a blog, and it had knowledge of stuff blog, which was just like a word, it was public, but it was only like for friends and family, a WordPress blog or something like that. And it had knowledge of that because it was on the internet at some point. So it must have scanned everything on WordPress. But you have to be very scripted to get the right, because as I said, there's 10 million people at the same time trying to write silly things that Ian's trying to write at the same time. So it's trying to pull all that huge amount of information really quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so I asked it about Richard Taylor, and apparently you're a physicist and professor at the University of Oregon. So then I asked it who runs Final Cut Pro Radio, and I'm really sorry to say I'm not aware of any specific radio program called Final Cut Pro Radio and who runs it.
Podcast.
Like, oh, come on.
Podcast. Put the podcast instead of radio. That's all.
I think it's not.
There's a couple of famous Richard Taylors. One worked on Twin Peaks. He was a supervising sound editor, and another one I thought worked on Lord of the Rings. Was there Richard Taylor involved with that?
Yeah, it runs Weta Workshop.
Yeah.
Which was when I first did my first podcast with Richard Taylor. Everyone in the office was very disappointed that it wasn't Richard Taylor from Weta Workshop because we all have a shared calendar. So when I added Richard Taylor there, everyone's like, what? This is the greatest news ever. But alas, it was the Richard Taylor, not the Richard Taylor.
Right.
Oh, Leon, I'm sorry it doesn't know about you either. We're all anonymous.
Did you spell his name right, Ian? Did you spell his name right, last name right?
Yes, I did.
I'm very okay with that.
I mean, it's fine. We're all anonymous at the end anyway.
Absolutely.
We're all worm food given enough time. I mean, come on.
Absolutely.
It's all good.
What else? Anything else? Oh, I'm going to show you one thing. Let me just pull this up. You guys are in the middle of summer. This is my yesterday out here.
Wow.
Well, it was, I think 35 or 36 degrees Celsius here today. So that's quite different.
Yeah, this is the first. Well, usually we get a lot of snow in January, February. This time it wasn't. It's just starting to come out. So what else do we have here? This is my sunrise. Look at this. across the street. This was taken with my DJI drone. And trees. I see this quite often, actually. When I'm riding my bike inside, and I'll look outside and see what colors the skies are. And then this is, oh, here we go. It's my cats. This is taken the other day. This is the front cat room. We have Lucy is the orange cat, and then Luther's up there on the top of the tree. He's our Russian blue. So that's fun. Gotta go. See you later. Okay. Florian. Oh, by the way, I got a question. So I watch, for whatever reason, end up watching a lot of Australian TV shows and movies with Australian actors and stuff. I have to turn the subtitles on. Because even though I can hear the words, I don't quite sometimes make the connection. Do you guys have to do that for American television?
No, we grew up on The Simpsons, so I grew up on The Simpsons.
I mean, sometimes the words are different, but sometimes I can hear the words and intellectually, but I just don't quite understand. So I turn the subtitles on so I can, that's what they're talking about. It makes it easier.
I think for most non-American English-speaking countries, like in South Africa and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, we get a lot of American TV and movies, so we'd be exposed to a lot of American accents. So like even if it's a Midwestern accent or a Southern accent or a Californian accent, familiar with it, whereas I suppose most Americans aren't exposed that often to non-American accents, so you wouldn't be as used to it as we would.
Okay. I mean, sometimes I got to do it for British too. My girlfriend and I will look at each other. What did they just say? I don't know. Go back and rewind it, put the subtitles on. Oh, okay, now we understand. But I was just wondering if it was the same.
I've got a random side note story that's sort of related to something Ian was talking about earlier with Whisper AI. We were doing something in the office last week or a couple of weeks ago where we had some footage where we had to do captions for it, and no one in the office could understand what the person said. They sort of just mumbled something. It was like, oh, we're going to... And none of us could work out what it was said. And we put it through Lumberjack, which has the Whisper stuff, and it came out with something about hot dogs and it wasn't quite right. So we sort of went inside the bundle and switched out the model with the large model, which is like gigabytes bigger.
Right.
And it got it. And as soon as you read what it said, all our brains went, oh, so obvious. It wasn't hot dog thing. It was just, I went to the park.
Right,
and all of our, like, we could hear it in it. Now I can play it and you hear it. It's easy. But it took that AI to actually tell the humans what this person was saying. And it's just crazy.
Absolutely. So I downloaded that app, Chris, that you mentioned yesterday with the, what was it called that uses that for transcription?
Whisper app. But the format that it came out with was too, the lines for me are too spread out. There's like a lot of space in between each individual line. We use Lumberjack for that.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's another thing in the comments. Use legend a lot. And a lot of people I just say legend, thanks. And they're like, what are you talking about? What? Am I a legend?
Yeah.
I get a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, mate.
I don't know if we use it that much. We don't use mate that much in the United States. But anytime there's mate, or what's the other one that I see all the time? Something, and I said, that person's probably Australian, because that's common vernacular for you guys. But anyway, I haven't used Lumberjack yet, but I will in the future. I use Descript, which does a really good, it gives you both the SRT and it gives you a text file, time code stamped text file, which is what I prefer. So I can search through it for certain words, see the time code, then I can go to that specific spot. So, but for some reason, the Whisper app, for me, it had all the individual line in a big space, and the individual line in a big space. I couldn't, get it condensed.
Each app's sort of different. Whisper's like the underlying OpenAI technology.
Okay.
So it's like the framework that does it. And then as soon as it came out, and someone, a genius, I can't remember his name, came out with a native Mac version of Whisper, the Whisper technology, I guess. And that's when people like Greg and Lumberjack took Whisper, the Mac version, Whisper CPP, whatever it is, and brought that into their app. So I'm sure all of these third-party things, like I'm sure whatever his name is, the guy that does what's the SRT importer, Final Cut SRT importer 2, I'm sure Whisper support at some point, and you won't have to input an SRT, it'll just auto magically do it, because Whisper is crazy and the large model is better than humans.
The other word is bloke. It seems like if you use the word bloke, you're a little bit pissed off at somebody. Is that correct? By context?
Yes.
Hey, bloke.
Oh,
It
come on,
seems like
bloke.
it seems like
could
you're
be-
annoyed.
No, I think very often it's, he's a good bloke, things like that.
Yeah,
like,
that's good. Yeah,
for example, there's an example in the South African vernacular. So, for example, if someone with quite a strong South African accent goes, "Listen, my friend," basically you're not their friend, and the time for listening has passed.
yes. As someone who has worked in South Africa, I definitely got that talk to me a few times.
Yeah, how far is South Africa
Well-
from Australia? What kind of a flight is it?
A very long way.
Is it?
It's about
14 hours?
Yeah, about 15. I think there's a direct flight from Sydney to Johannesburg, which is about 15 hours.
You
about the
guys are
same
far
length
away from everything. Everybody.
Yeah.
You guys, everything's a
it-
20-hour trip.
Everything's at least 10 to 15 hours.
Wow.
Well, 3.5 hours to New Zealand, 10 hours to Japan. Could be worse.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
But look, if you want confusing, yeah, nah. Yeah, nah.
Is that yes, no?
Could be either.
Yeah, nah, yeah.
Or another South African one is, "I'll do that just now."
With yeah, nah, and nah, yeah, just ignore the first word and listen to the second one, and you're more or less going
okay.
to get there.
It's like an emphasis of the second word.
Nah, yeah.
I haven't heard that one that much, but I've seen bloke in texts, and I've seen that and then dude, or not dude, but bloke seems like people
I
are
think the
annoyed.
one
Hey,
thing
bloke.
I have to be careful with whenever I've gone to NAB or stuff is just Americans really don't like casual swearing, especially some words.
It's funny you say that, because my brain was sort of ticking over all the phrases that I know and we can't say outside of Australia.
Well,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
British, of course, use the C word all the time in their television shows, constantly. Everybody, just normal, rolling off the tongue. It's like, whoa, you don't do that in the United States. Not. I mean, Ricky
that's
Gervais
definitely gets you
uses it all the time, of course. But anything else? I mean, we're like reaching Jeff Greenberg territory in this episode. We're at 2 hours and 23 minutes and 34 seconds. I think Jeff was about to
He
say.
wrote that Final Cut book, didn't he?
He did. I interviewed him on the podcast about it.
Well, I did manage to check ChatGPT again while we've been talking, and this time it said Michael Wall wrote it, whereas Michael wrote a previous book about Final Cut Pro. So maybe one day, after I correct it a few times, it'll get it right.
But if you asked it to make a Command Post Lua script for moving the Final Cut playhead to a specific time code, it'll do that and probably do a pretty good job.
I'm going to do it right now.
Oh, by the way, I have my documentary I've been working on for a few years. We're screening on April the 29th at the Silver Theater in Silver Spring outside of Washington, D.C. That's the first,
very exciting.
first film of mine
It's
I've ever
riding
seen on the big screen.
That's
Yeah,
very
congratulations. It is writing a Lua script. It's setting a local time code. Local frames equals FTP : timecode 2 frames brackets timecode. FCP set playhead frames. Is this all garbage?
Who knows? I didn't even know. You just have to try it, and then when there's a bug, you just ask it to fix it, and it'll apologize, and then eventually it'll get it right, and you have BRAW Toolbox.
Wow. Yeah. Great.
Fantastic.
But I guess coding's a bit easier than I say that, but like the main things I use it for are coding and writing rhyming poems that are heartfelt and make people cry. That's pretty much the 2 use cases for ChatGPT. Complicated
That's only
coding
useful
questions.
once a year. In about 2 weeks.
I'm just going to do
now,
like
we'll need
individual Christmas cards that are just like emotional blackmail. Please write me an emotional blackmail rhyming poem to Ian Anderson about Final Cut Pro.
There you go.
that. Okay. I'm going to do it right now.
Make sure it has a dramatic twist. Please
Okay.
make it award winning.
Well,
And then we
anyway,
can end the
here's-
show and everyone can go to bed.
Here, yeah, absolutely. You guys are
Yes.
up late. Here's hoping Final Cut Pro at NAB, an update for Final Cut Pro at NAB.
Okay, hang on a sec. I said, please make me a rhyming poem about Final Cut Pro featuring Lee Herbert and Chris Hawking with a dramatic twist. I apologize, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm not aware of any notable person by the name of Lee Herbert and Chris Hawking working as a cinematographer. Therefore, I cannot make a rhyming poem as per your request. However, if you give me some more context about them or any other subject, I would be happy to help you with a poem.
I don't know what
Update
your
my
ChatGPT.
IMDb.
Maybe you've just been mean to it, and it's now just messing with you.
I'm just going to ask it, please. No.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
we'll compare our ChatGPTs.
Oh, but by the way, this new version of Ecamm, it's in beta. I'm using the beta version. It's recorded auto ISO for a while. It now records auto video files as well as audio ISO. All the while I'm streaming live and running all those windows, it does all this. Now it needs the Apple Silicon Mac to do that, but it records the individual video files in I think 1080p is what I'm streaming at. So
Cool. Well,
All
I'm
right.
asking when the next major version of Final Cut will be released, but it
There you
doesn't
go.
know.
doesn't know. I'm saying by NAB, right around before NAB, end of March, April. Perfect timing. You gather that NAB momentum. It's been 2 years. I mean, it's been a year since we had 2 features last year. Come on. Okay.
I'm saying Tuesday.
Fingers crossed.
Well, it's probably a Tuesday. A lot
All
of
right,
times
Ian,
it's
I've
a
got your
Tuesday.
poem. There once was a handsome. I need AI to read it for me. There once was a handsome man named Ian who loved editing videos with disdain. He worked all day and all through the night to make sure each cut was just right. Along came a funny South African. His name was Lee, and he was quite a fan of Ian's work and Final Cut Pro. Together, they'd make videos that would flow. But one day, while they were on a roll, their program crashed and they lost control. All their footage was gone in a flash. They thought their careers would come to a crash. But Ian and Lee were not the ones to fret. They quickly found a solution, you bet. They used another program, Avid, and their videos turned out better than they did. So now they've known as editing pros with skills that rival any of those. Who thought that Final Cut was the one? But Ian and Lee have just begun.
And that is a perfect closing to this episode of Final Cut TV.
I will paste that in our guest chat.
There you go.
So I think the moral of the story, Ian, is that the
dear.
AI hates you.
Yeah, that's it.
And I didn't,
Clearly.
the prompt wasn't I didn't write anything about Avid or anything. So anyway, crazy
Anyway.
technology.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Once again, you guys are the best. We're going to have you on again in short period of time this time. All right?
Yep. Bye, BRAW Toolbox and Gyroflow Toolbox.
Absolutely. See
Yes,
y'all later.
buy his things.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.